European Union, and it's time we recognise what is happening in our name. We can consign austerity to the dustbin of history. But you can't do it by simply moving resolutions. You can't do it by great speeches. Two of the greatest, James Larkin and James Connolly, spoke here in Manchester in 1913, and they warned that independence from an oppressor, be it Jeremy Hunt, be it anyone else in the Tory government, or be it a system anywhere in the world, if you get independence or justice, it will fail unless you replace the capitalist system that causes it and exchange it for a world where human beings matter and not profit. In other words, you change the world. Let's examine what's happened since 1896 in May Day in Chicago for the 8-hour day. Well, I've been checking the figures, and in Britain we now have a situation where full-time workers are working nearly 9 hours a day. Junior doctors theoretically do 9.6 hours a day, but in reality are working 71 hours a week. The fight by junior doctors is for the NHS itself. It's a fight about whether we have a health service available at the time of need, upon demand, and free of charge. Or alternatively, we go backwards into the quagmire where if you couldn't pay, you couldn't get treatment. I'll tell you one of the problems we've got, and it's a legacy from 1945 to 1950. We have the scandal, today, of senior consultants doing a third of their work in private hospitals or for private work. Well, I make it clear where I stand. I would ban all private medicine if a person needs treatment. They keep saying, well, what can we do about the NHS? I'll tell you what they can do. They can finance it. They can pay doctors what they're worth. They can pay health service workers, the cleaners, those who cook the food, those who do all the jobs. They can pay them a decent wage. And if they don't do that, then we won't have an NHS. It's a struggle which our forefathers and sisters fought for. We wanted a national health service. Think how many of us in this room have had treatment that we wouldn't have received. I'm old enough to remember going to the local doctors with 6p in an envelope to pay for the doctor to come out if he was required. Never again should we go back to that system. We've got some of the brightest talent in the world, but it's a crime that we first of all can't give places in universities to build a health service with sufficient doctors and sufficient support staff so that nobody has to wait on a waiting list, whether it be a month or 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 hours. It should be there when people are taken ill. They should be treated. It's not a pipe dream. It actually worked in 1948 and 49 and 50. So don't let's kid ourselves that it's an impossible dream. What can we do? Well, I'm going to be a bit critical. I went on a picket line with the junior doctors I didn't say I was. This young doctor said to me, do you know, she said, it's my first strike. She said, it's the first time I've been on the picket line. I said, me too. She still doesn't know who I was. But think of the impact when the Shadow Health Secretary stood up in the House of Commons and said, I will preempt what Hunt is going to say. I will not be on a picket line. I will be doing my work trying to resolve this issue. I'll tell you what Jeremy Corbyn should have done, shall I? He should have said, every member of Parliament, go out and go on a picket line now. With the people like Brendan Barber and all the staff that we've seen over the years, sell-out workers including mine. But one thing we didn't do, the leadership of the National Union of Mine Workers, we never gave in. We never, at any time, set call off the strike. I think it's important to remember, what was the greatest victory? It was the struggle itself. My great-grandparents were Irish, and I know the celebrations that took place in Dublin, and I was proud of my family's role in it, and I was proud to be associated with people who supported the right of independence. But I can't understand for the life of me, whether it be in Ireland or whether it be Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, who argues on the one hand for independence from England, to give it away free to unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. It doesn't make sense. It's hypocrisy of the lifetime. Unemployment. The figures, like the figures about Orgreave, the figures about Hillsborough, have been cooked. I'm going to quote a newspaper, The Guardian. The official figure that's repeated day in and day out on our television screens, radio stations and newspapers is 1.8 million. It's a lie. According to The Guardian, not exactly a raving revolutionary paper, the real figure of unemployment is 11 million. You don't need a statistician. Go around any city, go around any town, see the homeless on the streets with no food. Go and see the food banks. It's a crime against humanity. They keep arguing what's the right figure for a national minimum wage. They keep saying, is it £8, £9, £7? I'll tell you what the figure should be, shall I? It should be the average national wage. And the average national wage is 25,500, which comes to £12 an hour. That's the sort of minimum wage we should have, and a wage that should be paid for pensioners all over the world. Now I'm going to cross swords with Jeremy Corbyn. I've got a right to do so. Jeremy's been a friend of mine for 20 odd years. And he and I organised a reception for my close friend Tony Benn. He stood on a platform in 2015, and like speaker after speaker, I even thought there's a glimmer of hope, because the policies that are being advocated to scrap Trident, to come out of Europe, to do all the things that are necessary to make a change, a fundamental change, are being espoused from the platform. First of all, a statement of compromise that we can have nuclear submarines without nuclear warheads. Doesn't make sense. But you can at least understand, probably, just about why it was said. And I'm sorry, nothing prepared me for Jeremy Corbyn saying that Britain should stay in the European Union. I am absolutely committed to campaigning to come out of the European Union and back into the world. And let me say to you, where would you trade? We'd trade with all those nations that we've been prevented from trading with. The Cooperative Bank made an admission the other day. I don't know how many people know this, but they suspended several bank accounts, including Cuba Solidarity, including the Socialist Labour Party, of which I'm leader. And they suspended mine as well, individually. I asked them why. They said, well, it doesn't meet our criteria. But I said, you've been doing it for 10 years. Did you know it's been taken over by hedge funds? 80% now own what was the Cooperative Bank. And I know one person in here who's still the director of the co-op movement, and a good lad. And years ago I was, unpaid by the way. And it's important that we understand the background to the European Union, the Cooperative Bank, and what happens. Because the excuse that they've given this last week of why they stopped the Palestinian Solidarity Movement bank account was political. They didn't want to offend the United States of America's policy. What an admission! And someone ought to be raising it. Certainly in Parliament, Labour politicians should be asking why. A bank taken over by these people are operating political policies against sections that they don't like. The European Union is not something thought of in Brussels. It's an American project. It's a history lesson, this. It was looked upon in the 1940s after the war by a man called President Truman. Later Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson and Nixon all supported the European Union and financed it. Newly released documents show that US intelligence funded the European Common Market campaign and the concept of a European Union. And they did that for decades. It shows in clear black and white terms that they provided 53.5% of Euro-friendly groups in 1958. There's a long history as to why Obama is desperate to maintain Britain's membership of the European Union, which in effect will become the 51st state of the USA. And now we've got TTIP as well. Some people may not have heard of it. It's a policy designed to further assist international capitalism at the expense of workers. Britain's continued membership of the EU will plunge our country and other countries into the same situation as we saw in Greece and we've seen in Ireland. Don't be fooled by the so-called turnaround in Ireland. For the first time since 1923, the Republic of Ireland has established a council tax, water charges and slashed pensions. And they breached a historic pledge given by the government in Ireland that never again would a family be evicted from their home, yet evictions are now the order of the day. I have to say that I am disgusted with the way that Jeremy has come out in favour of Britain remaining as a member of the EU. He was elected as party leader last September, and he was elected on a programme that was committed to coming out of Europe. If Tony Benn had been here today, I'm sure that he would have shared the views that I'm expressing. They're not personal, they're political. And it's time that we recognise that decisions like this represent the ultimate betrayal. And it's one of the reasons why the people who want to attack him and undermine him are having a field day. Instead of compromising on these issues, he should have stood square and said, look, I will scrap Trident. I will use that money to fund the NHS. We will come out of the European Union and we'll go back into the world. If he'd have done that, he would have had massive support from all sections of the labour and trade union movement, and also from sections of the non-trade union movement. It's important that we understand the need, which way we vote in June on this vital, fundamental issue. How many people saw the picture of Cameron, Paddy Ashdown and Kinnock laughing as they tried to drum up telephone support to remain in the EU? That one photograph alone should have told you, they're wrong, we're right. Vote no on the 23rd of June. What would we get if we left? Well, we're told we'd lose trade union rights, we'd lose this, we'd lose the other. We're acting like dinosaurs, said the Daily Mail, and I was a chief dinosaur. They said he wants to go back to the 1970s. Too true I do. In the 1970s we could do things. Think of what we could have achieved without the EU. Just think about what we've achieved. You've heard it. You've heard about that, the struggle of the suffragettes. They won the vote for everyone. That was a victory without the EU. As quick as I can. We can't do what Gandhi said, and that is our homespun. We can't protect our own industries. We can give £350 billion to banks who are in trouble, but we can't give 1 million or 2 million to a steel industry in order to preserve jobs of workers. They would never forgive me if I didn't refer to Hillsborough and Orgreave. I was overjoyed with the decision of the coroner's jury. The jury system, for once, demonstrated it can understand what's being said and who's at fault. In 1893, the last time that ever troops were turned out to kill workers on strike was in Featherstone in Yorkshire at a coal mine. Those men who were shot were later exonerated but never pardoned. And here we are in 2016 and we've still got the smears because we haven't got the truth, the full truth about Hillsborough. And we certainly haven't got the full truth about Orgreave. I've been asked by the BBC at least 6 times today to give them an answer as to who was to blame. 6 times I've given them an answer. 6 times they don't like the answer. I'll tell you what I blame. The people responsible for the events in Orgreave, which led to mass arrests, including me, which led to terrible injuries, including mine. was the responsibility on the orders of Margaret Thatcher and Neil Britain. The Chief Constable of South Yorkshire was in cahoots with them. It wasn't an unplanned issue. They planned to attack with dogs, staves, and boy did they attack. You've seen it yourself on television. Young men and women in t-shirts, plimsolls, that's all they had, facing literally a paramilitary force. But they were right. And the papers published in 2013 and 2014 demonstrate that they lied deliberately, not just to the miners, but they lied to the British public. Well, the papers that have not been disclosed need to be disclosed. And we who participated at Orgreave want to know the truth. We want to see who covered up what and when. And I've made people saying this. I've been a socialist and a Marxist since I was 15 years of age. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of my faith. And I want to see a world without war and without want, without discrimination of any kind. In other words, I want a world which, in the words of Connolly, is very simple. We don't ask for too much. We only want the earth. That's why we say it.
Thank you, Arthur. Folks, can you just listen to me? I need people's absolute cooperation now for anything to work. Everybody.